this week, Jade, we are talking about just in general bookkeeping.
We are.
Who should do it? Who should do it for their own business? When should you get some professional help? All of those sorts of things. And obviously this is going to be a case-by-case thing, but we're going to go through a few questions that you should be asking yourself and a few things to consider before you really make that decision of whether you keep it in-house with you or you hire a professional.
Absolutely. So I guess bookkeeping, it's the reason that we kind of started this podcast was because so many small business owners that go out and start their business, the last thing they're thinking about is bookkeeping. But eventually it does crop its head up and you realise that it's something that needs to be handled. So we're going to go through that today.
Yeah, and I think some of the things to point out is, if it's managed incorrectly, that DIY bookkeeping can lead to some really expensive mistakes, such as miscalculating your available cash and incurring penalties for incorrect tax filings or, those audits.
Exactly right. So I don't know where you want to start, but maybe we should start with what actually is bookkeeping.
Yeah.
And what does it involve? What is bookkeeping and what does it involve?
Yeah, so look, it's basically the practice of processing and recording those financial transactions that's made by a business, and the person managing the bookkeeping must understand the business's chart of accounts, technical term there, which we'll circle back to in a second. And effectively they use the debits and credits from the books to balance everything. So, the use of accounting systems, cloud accounting systems these days makes that double entry bookkeeping not as big of a thing, but you still need to know what you're doing.
Yeah, you still need to kind of understand how it all works.
Yeah, so Jade, let's go back to that word chart of accounts. What is that and what does that entail, setting up a chart of accounts?
So every business will have a chart of accounts, and it is that list of accounts that you probably get at the end of the year when your accountant does your tax return that's got all of the figures next to it and you just go, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to read this. But the chart of accounts is essentially the structure of your business, and it has a list of accounts that categorizes your transactions. So on there you will see a range of things from, advertising expense to repairs and maintenance expense, everything. We've got all of these accounts where all of your transactions from the year get allocated.
Yeah.
And we use that when we prepare your end of year tax return. So it is really important to make sure that chart of account is set up correctly for your business, because it's not a one size fits all. It's different for businesses depending on what accounts they need. And it's super, super important to make sure that is set up correctly.
Yeah, and I think the thing to keep in mind here is when you're setting those chart of accounts up, you need to understand basically what's a profit and loss account, what's a balance sheet account. And so those are the things, your profit and loss, you're looking at income and expenses. Your balance sheet, you're looking at assets, liabilities and equity. And so if you don't have a good understanding of what those different things are, it's going to be really hard for you to set up your chart of accounts and to know what those different accounts are.
Exactly right.
Okay, so then what do we do with those chart of accounts, Jade? How do we get those records into those charts?
Right, so we need to make sure that we are record keeping our accounts properly. So a lot of you, I'm sure will be on an accounting software such as Xero, QBO or MyOb. There are also some businesses that are quite small that keep their information on a spreadsheet, which is of course totally fine as well. But it's all about record keeping. So you need to have a look at those transactions and allocate them to an account on the chart of accounts. So most businesses do start by keeping a simple spreadsheet before moving on to a bookkeeping software. And the software does make it a lot easier, as you can hook up to your bank account and bring in those bank transactions automatically.
Yeah.
And like we've said on the show quite a few times, we recommend making sure you do your bank reconciliations daily. Do it while you're having a cuppa in the morning. so it doesn't get out of control. But we need to make sure that we are keeping our records up to date, getting everything reconciled and allocated.
And particularly for those businesses who are registered for GST, that record keeping stage is where you're making sure that you're picking up the GST on your expenses and the GST on your income, so that when it comes time to do the BAS, which rolls around very quickly, it's not a fight to go back through and go, wait, hang on a minute. Did this have GST on it or not? What's actually going on here? So at that particular point is probably when you need to be looking at your receipts and your invoices and those sorts of things to make sure everything's being picked up correctly at that point in time.
Absolutely. So another important aspect of bookkeeping is accounts payable and accounts receivable, which is something that a lot of businesses would have, and they probably don't have their finger on the pulse as much as they really should, especially with the accounts receivable.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I know we've spoken about cash flow heaps of times, and so this is just going back to the basics of those sorts of things. So basically, what do they mean? Accounts receivable is the money that is owed to you from your customers. So you do a job, you invoice a customer, that then sits as part of your accounts receivable until you receive the money.
Exactly.
Obviously, if you operate like a retail shopfront and things like that, that transaction can happen instantly. So as soon as your customer's buying the product, they are paying for it, which is really good. But for some other models, it can be a really big issue in your business if you're not on top of it, especially for service-based businesses and wholesalers. And then on the flip side, your accounts payable is, what you are paying your suppliers. So you order products from your supplier that you're then going to sell. When you get that invoice from your supplier, it then becomes part of your accounts payable. And until you physically make that payment, that's where that sits. So it's all about, making sure that your accounts receivable is as low as possible. So your customers are paying you, but you're also paying your suppliers on time as well. And it's just managing that balance and that cash flow.
Yeah, it's all about the cash flow, really, making sure that you're getting that money in and it's also going out to the people that it needs to, that you owe money to.
Yeah.
Another thing that needs to be that you need to be aware of with bookkeeping if you have employees is the employee expense management. So often when you have employees, there are expenses associated with that, of course, but the big one with bookkeeping is probably employee reimbursement. So if your employees go out and spend money, their own money on something, and you need to reimburse them for it, that's something that you need to keep track of. And I know that Xero has that a really nice app where the employees can put through that they need a reimbursement, and they can take a photo of the receipt and invoice, which is really, really nice, and it all integrates with Xero. But that is something a lot of people don't think about as well, how to handle that. And we do, you and I, Lauren, and Jigsaw recently got the Wheel app, which is a bit of like a corporate credit card, I guess, essentially, that employees can download on their phone and pay for things directly, which takes out that employee reimbursement. And we did do a podcast episode talking about Wheel a while ago, which we'll put a link in the show notes if you want to learn more about that.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, what else do we need to consider? So those expenses, those things that we've paid for, those receipts, we have to manage all of those. In Australia, we have to keep those particular records for a certain amount of time in case the ATO decides that they want to have a look at it. And so it's really important that you have some sort of system to manage your receipts. Again, this kind of comes down to personal preference, whether you're a paper person or a up in the cloud person. I know that, Jade, we love the cloud, and, we have some apps that we recommend. Data Molino is one that we think is just fabulous for your receipt management, and it can also then integrate with your online accounting software as well, which makes things a lot easier. It also means that, in the instance of, I know we have had so many natural disasters in Australia over the past few years, floods, bushfires, things like that. If something happens to your house and your records, they're not gone forever. So you have them. You have the ability to access them when they're stored in the clouds. They're secure and they're safe, and you don't have to hold on to all of that paper. And obviously there's the sustainability aspect to it as well.
Definitely. There is one more in regards to employees as well, and that is managing their payroll. So if you do have staff that you're paying, of course, you need to keep track of their payroll. And something in regards to bookkeeping, it's not just as simple as making the payment to the staff member. You need to keep track of it and ensure that your payroll reconciles. So you need to make sure that those amounts are matching, that what you've said you've paid your employees, you actually have, and vice versa with their superannuation and everything like that. Yeah. So there is quite a bit to the payroll reconciliation process that you need to do when bookkeeping. And it is something that the accountants will more than often do when the end of year accounts are done, but it's important to check it regularly so it doesn't get to tax time and your payroll's way out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of those things, it's the matter of paying your staff, but we now also have single touch payroll that's come in. That's applicable to all businesses who employ employees, even those who employ themselves, which is really important. And so that needs to be reported to the tax office. Your payroll needs to be reported to the tax office through single touch payroll. So in those instances, you do need to have an accounting software that does integrate with the ATO for STP purposes. And that's really important. So there's a lot to it. Those accounting programs or those payroll programs can also do your wage entitlement calculations and things like that, which is so handy. So it's a big one, that one. Payroll's
it is a big one. And it's one that I don't think people realise how complex it can be.
And how important, like we just saw in the naughty corner.
Yeah, you don't want to get that wrong. Another one that is dreaded by quite a few people is the bank the bank reconciliation.
We love it, but not everyone does.
Well, I will say we only love it when we can get it to reconcile,
That's
I think. Right. When we can't, we don't love it. But what is the bank rec, Lauren? What do people need to know about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's basically going through and making sure that you've picked up all of those transactions that's happened in your bank and you've allocated them correctly to an account that is part of your chart of accounts, and that the balance that you have, your running balance in either your accounting program or on your spreadsheet is matching what's actually happened in the bank.
Yeah, exactly right. So you want to make sure that it is reconciled. What's in there matches the bank. And let me tell you, there are quite a few times that is not the case. It's not that easy.
Exactly. And then you have to go back line by line trying to find out which transaction, or in some cases transactions, haven't flowed through properly and what's going on.
Exactly. So it is a process, that one too.
Absolutely. The next one that I'm going to talk about is really, really crucial to your business's viability, and that's creating your invoices, your sales invoices. So this is where you are invoicing your customers, and this one is one that we recommend stays with the business owner. You need to have full control over the revenue that your business is making. So we never recommend outsourcing this to anyone else. Keep it in-house so that you have that direct control over creating your invoices. And basically, all it is just saying, hey, I've done this work for you, or I've provided these products for you, and you need to pay me this much money. You need to make sure, though, that it's complying with obviously the laws. So you need to be displaying your ABN. If you're registered for GST, that component needs to be split out. And obviously, where are they paying you is another big thing to look at as well.
Yeah, I must admit there are probably 2 or 3 times I've gotten an invoice personally and there's been no payment details on there.
Yeah.
And I've kind of got to go, where do you want me to pay this? And I'm looking on the invoice going, where am I paying this?
Absolutely. And obviously it's vital to any business's life form, but also super important to business owners to make sure that they're getting paid for what they're doing. So make sure that you do have that on there.
Yes, definitely.
So a few questions that I guess you can ask yourself when you're choosing whether to do your own bookkeeping that we've prepared. What's the first one, Jade?
So the first one is you probably need to think about your most important asset, which is time. So how much time can you dedicate to the bookkeeping of your business? Can you do those bank recs daily? Can you sit down and make sure everything's up to date? Or are you so flat out that you can't look at it until it's BAS time and everything's behind and you don't know where everything's up to? So you really need to think about your time and whether you can dedicate the time that's needed to the bookkeeping.
Absolutely. Number 2 is how much finance training and experience do you have? Because obviously some of the things that we've just gone through, they're all surround numbers and finance and things like that. And if that's stuff that makes you go, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing, or yuck, I can't even deal with this, maybe it's time to look at getting a professional in to help you. So, I mean, look, you need to this is where those mistakes come in. If you don't know what you're doing, it can lead to some really, really costly mistakes. And that's something that we don't want for any business. We don't have to want you to come in a panic and go, I have no idea what I've done. And we go, hey, this is going to cost you X amount of dollars. And you start going, well, where am I going to get that from?
Exactly right. Exactly. And the third question is whether you need to share your financial information of your business with anybody else. So you might have a business partner that wants to see the figures quite regularly of how the business is performing. Are you going to have the time to get that up to date and also the skills to get that up to date regularly? Something we also see quite often at Jigsaw Tax is businesses that need their accounts up to date for finance purposes if they're getting a loan from the bank or something like that.
Yeah.
You need to present the bank with that information. So are you the type of person that is quite often going for finance and needing, has that relationship with the bank where you need your information up to date quite regularly? Then you are probably the type of person who needs to make sure you have the time and skills to get it up to date or look for help.
Absolutely. And something that I just want to chuck in here is around knowing your numbers of your business, because for you to be able to make really critical decisions about your business, you need to be able to at any one time know exactly where your business is at, where it's performing at. Those numbers are really important, because how are you going to make decisions? Things like, should I put an employee on? Well, how are you going to know that if you don't know where your business operating is up to and how everything's going? So, these cloud-based accounting softwares make it so easy so that at any one point you can log in and go, hey, this is where I'm up to, this is what's going on. And, as a business owner, you should be invested in your numbers. It should be something that you do, whether you hire someone to help you with it or not. It's still having that relationship and that knowledge to go, this is where my business is up to, this is where my performance is up to right now as of today. So I know that if I need to make an important decision, I can do it.
Exactly right. Your books aren't 3 months behind and not knowing where things are. The other thing with small businesses is that they change so quickly. So while you may have started off on a spreadsheet with not much going on and it being very manageable, businesses grow. And we've seen plenty of times how quickly that can happen and how overwhelming and out of control the bookkeeping can get.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to kind of go, actually, I could handle this at the beginning, but now it's a bit too much for me and I need some help.
Exactly. So alternatives to doing your own bookkeeping. The first one is to hire a bookkeeper as an employee. So obviously we wouldn't recommend this unless, you were in quite a large business where that was sustainable. But it is an option.
It is.
If you are a multi-facet business that has, 6 or 7 branches that needs, a whole heap of stuff done, maybe that's an option for you. It might work out cheaper for you in the long run. But the second option, Jade?
The second option is to outsource the bookkeeping. So contact a bookkeeping firm, ask your accountant, get some help with the bookkeeping of that, and they are professionals. They know what they're doing.
Absolutely. So just I'm going to do a bit of a plug here. I don't know if you guys know, but for those who have been following our social media and listened to a few of our previous episodes, we are launching our own bookkeeping service.
Woo,
so
how exciting.
At the moment it's in trial phase. We've got some clients who are trialing it out, which is really awesome. But next year it will be full steam ahead. So if you are looking for a bookkeeper and you're going, oh my gosh, everything that Jade and Lauren have just spoken about is so overwhelming and I do need help with that, reach out to us, and we'll pop the email address in the show notes, and maybe just in this week's episode alert, we might just pop some information about what we can actually help with in the new year.
Yeah, and it's the perfect time to make that change in the new year. Make sure that your business books are all up to date. And we can help with that. We know it can be so overwhelming, and that's what we're here for.
I know, it's our life. It's what we live and breathe every single day. And, your whole reason for going into business, unless you run a bookkeeping business, was not to do bookkeeping. It was to get out and do what you loved doing and create the lifestyle that you wanted to have from running your own business. So, like I would never try and build my own house, just reach out to a professional, might be us. We would be happy to help you.
Exactly right.